Are you in charge tonight? Brooke, you're in charge tonight.
I am, and we are live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the study session of the University City Council meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. On the 20th of June. Mr. Rose.
Honorable Mayor and council members, I want to start off by thanking you for giving us the opportunity to present the proposed FY 2024.
Gregory, I don't think anyone can hear you.
I want to start out by thanking you for giving us the opportunity to present the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget to you and capital improvement program. Also want to recognize all of the directors, the Deputy City Manager, Brooke Smith, who did much of the work in putting the budgets together, and a special recognition for Keith Cole, our finance director, and his staff who put the document together. Fiscal year 2023 has been, without saying, a very challenging year. No one would have ever expected that on top of dealing with COVID, we would also have to deal with a historic flood. But we have survived that. We are still recovering, but as you will see throughout this budget presentation, we are still in a very strong financial position. The proposed budget was put together with the priorities that you have agreed on in mind, ranging from economic development, but perhaps the most important priority are the employees of the organization. Without them, service delivery simply isn't possible. Oh, something's not working. If you can press it forward to the organizational. Each of you should have a copy of the presentation in front of you. And so I will go from that document if it's okay with you while he is correcting this. The organization structure has been identified for you. There are a couple of changes to it that I would like to highlight. I have placed in the structure the judge and the prosecutor, and I've also moved the city attorney up, actually the Department of Law, to a different position. Here on the bottom are all of the core, I would say, departments within the organization. Yeah, there we go. That's working now. Thank you. I would also like to bring to your attention, particularly for the Parks and Recreation and Forestry Department, the addition of a new division, that being the Public Area Maintenance Division, highlighted here as streets, that is also being proposed. Often are asked about resident property tax bills, and where does that money go? And so this slide provides you with information on the actual breakdown of a regular property, or the property tax amounts for the city. And as you can see, for the city of University City, the property tax amount is equal to about 7.7% of the total tax bill that a resident receives. So what does that mean? For a home value of roughly $215,000, the assessed value being $41,000, University City, the city of University City receives about $237 of that tax bill, or 7.7% of the total amount that a resident would pay. I'd like to highlight some of the major items for the proposed budget. We intend to reduce the property tax rate to the amount that's recommended by the county when compared to FY 2023. The proposed budget also includes a 2% cost of living increase. And I want to distinguish that from the merit increases that most employees receive throughout the year. The cost of living allowance is really intended to keep the buying power of an individual at the same rate. Now, certainly we recognize that inflation was unusually high over the past year. But if you look at the 2% cost of living allowance, and you also couple that with most employees receive roughly a 5% merit increase, their buying power should remain the same, if not increase slightly. I'm proposing to change the name of the RPA 2 fund to the Third Ward Revitalization Fund. I think that makes it more clear as to what the intended use of those funds are for. This proposed budget reflects the additional revenues to be received from the market at Olive development. It focuses primarily on the opening of Costco and the revenues that we are projecting to receive from that opening. It reflects the additional revenue to be received from the marijuana tax. Again, it creates the public right-of-way maintenance division. It reflects a portion of the 2019 recommended solid waste increases, which were not implemented because I did not recommend them, primarily because of COVID. And then, on the heels of that, the historic flood. This proposed budget also recommends the creation of an equipment replacement fund. One of the things that we are recognizing is that we need to have more funds stored away. We are purchasing, as you know, a great deal of new equipment because of the impacts of the flood. So as that equipment user life passes, we need to be in a financial position to purchase those pieces of equipment. And there will be several that comes in at one time. So we'll need to try and stagger that purchase over the course of several years. I want to speak with you briefly about the all funds summary. It shows the total revenues and expenditures and gives you the fund balance for all funds, roughly around $18 million. If you look at the revenues that we received, what you will be able to discern is that most of our revenues are from sales and use tax, as well as gross receipt tax. It's important to recognize that because it really establishes clearly why it's so important to diversify our local economy. If we simply rely on property taxes as we were created or developed as a bedroom community, because of the John Hancock Amendment, we would not be sustainable. Continuing to increase the number of businesses, particularly that generate sales tax within University City, is important now, and it will be into the future. I don't think it was John Hancock, but Hancock Amendment. Male Hancock. Thank you. This is just an exploding pie chart that reflects the revenue source percentage. I'm sure as most of you can guess where the majority of the revenues are expended. General fund, which houses most of the services, certainly receives the lion's share of that at roughly 60% of all funds that are all expenditures that are approved are proposed. This just gives you a pie chart that reflects the information in the previous slide, but really tells you more clearly just how large of a percentage that is. I want to focus now on simply the general fund, and as I stated, it contains the bulk of the services that the city provides. I am not recommending any additional staff within the general fund. The fund provides or proposes to provide for public safety equipment and training. Also, it provides for the Gallup surveying that you recently approved. It creates a public right-of-way maintenance division under the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Division. And perhaps equally important is that it establishes a 37% reserve fund balance. Now, this fund balance will increase because of the information that we received regarding the settlement of the charter case. And that means for the city, roughly $950,000 in addition, but that was not known when this was developed. So that will increase our fund balance some. Within the general fund, the revenue sources, again, sales and use tax and gross receipts tax are the revenue sources that we heavily rely upon. Property taxes make up about 13% of all of the revenues that we receive within general fund. This just gives you an example of a pie chart of that breakdown. General fund receives several transfers in for a number of reasons, ranging from loans that it has made to other funds, as well as a part of the payment for the equipment that was needed in other funds. We were told that it was better for general fund to make all of those payments. It simplified the budgeting or the financial end of it for auditing purposes. And then this budget proposes that those other funds begin to pay back general fund for those purchases. And so it tells you here the total amount that will be received in transfers in. The transmittal letter that's in the front of your budget book provides you with a bit more details on those transfers. General fund makes two primary transfers out. One, I'm proposing to the Third Ward Revitalization Fund. This will be the first year that general fund will be transferring monies consistent with the redevelopment agreement that was approved. This will need to increase by 16,000. The actual amount is 108,000 that will be recommended transferring out of general fund to the Third Ward Revitalization Funding. The other major fund that it transfers to is the fleet fund. That provides all of the maintenance for our equipment, our cars, police cars, fire trucks, and so forth. I'm sure that most of you understand the biggest expenditures that you have is protecting the public, making sure that the public is safe. And so police and fire, if you combine those, cost equals about 54% of the general fund expenditures. And if you combine police and fire and parks and recreation and forestry, and now the public maintenance area, you're looking at 73% of all of the funding that is proposed to be allocated for those purposes. This just gives you a pie chart breakdown of those expenditures and intended to show perhaps how drastic they are. The general fund summary, it indicates what our revenues will be, what we are proposing for expenditures, and the ending fund balance that is being proposed. Again, that will increase by roughly $950,000. I want to look at some of the highlights for the various departments. For the city manager's office, we're really talking about just maintaining the current service levels. I will seek an amendment that would allow for adding the citizen survey. If you recall, when we first conducted the resident satisfaction survey, you had agreed to do that on roughly a 2-year, every other year. And so 2024 would, if you still agree with conducting the survey, would be the time that that the survey would happen. For the finance department, I will be recommending that we elevate accountant position to the position of purchasing manager. There are certain functions that are within our charter that are required of the purchasing department. We simply do not have anyone that has that skill set on board. Some of the review that needs to occur, for example, minority participation within contracts. We don't have the capability of conducting that monitoring, and we do not have the capability of providing you with the report that we should on a more routine basis. So I'll be recommending elevating one currently vacant position that's within finance to a purchasing manager position. All other services will be maintained at the current levels within the finance department. Human resources will be responsible for conducting, working with Gallup, who is a company that leads the nation in surveying, to better train our employees and survey them on their job experience. We want to make sure that we provide our employees with the best work environment, the best work experience that we can. But that will require us to ask very difficult questions about how are we as a city manager and as directors performing. And so that's what that survey is intended to identify. In addition to that, we know that there are some deficiencies that exist within training of our employees. And so Human Resources, Amy Williams, who is our Human Resources Director, will be working with Gallup and also working with the department directors to identify the training needs for their respective departments. The police department, we're proposing to fund the speed trailers with radar signals, surveillance cameras for the parks, replacement of vehicles and equipment, the purchase of an unmanned vehicle drone, and the funding of updating of the computer servers and software. For fire, no additional staffing, continuing to fund the dispatching that you approved this fiscal year, but as well replacement of some of their radio equipment. And they also need to replace one of their drones. For Public Works, continuing to move forward with the renovation of the Annex and Trinity Building. Funds will continue to fund the street maintenance program and curb and sidewalk maintenance program. You will notice in the budget that we're proposing a slightly lower level of funding for both of those. The reason behind that is that for this fiscal year, you are investing about $2 million into those services. So it'll be a catch-up year in some ways because the staff trying to oversee all of those improvements this year. And with the addition of what we're proposing next year, we think that they will have a very full plate. But also keep in mind that as a part of this, we have not included the work that will be done on Canton Avenue. That will be in addition to what's being proposed here. We're also proposing for Public Works. This is actually up under the solid waste fund, the purchase of an alley loading truck, also a dump truck, and allocating funding to begin a bridge maintenance program. Up under planning and development, funding the nuisance abatement of lots, demolition, emergency board ups. We're maintaining the current service levels. I would like to take this opportunity to talk briefly about the next steps after the comprehensive plan has been updated. We will need to identify to determine if we need to update the zoning codes. There's a belief that we will, but we are not sure of the magnitude. So that update will either occur in-house or I'll be coming back to you asking for funding so that we can bring on board a consultant to assist John Wagner and his staff with the update of the zoning code. Up under Parks and Recreation, let me first state that we are very pleased that if all things go as we believe they will, we'll be opening the pool on Saturday from 12 to 6. Many of you may have been by the pool and now know that it is filled. All of the electrical work has been done, completed. The testing of the pumps were completed today. Everything is working. We have our staff aligned. So barring any unusual activity or something that just out of the norm, our intention is to open the pool on Saturday from 12 to 6. I won't say that we will be turning the page as much as we'll be expanding what we will be the improvements that we'll be looking to recommend to you at Centennial Common. One certainly is the gym floor that we know will cost roughly $1 million. We're waiting to get the approval from FEMA to move forward with that. As you know, we've gotten the dog park. At some point, if we don't get that very quickly, I'll take a similar approach or recommend a similar approach as to what we did with the pool, which is to continue to advance it because we believe we will get reimbursed from FEMA, but you will advance it without that certainty. For some of the other projects, such as the dog park, the fencing, there have been others that they have looked at recently and given us the go ahead to move forward with. you take a bit of a risk with the gym floor if that we haven't received that approval. But I'm fairly certain FEMA recognizes the damage from the flood and will be willing to approve a reimbursement, even if you move forward before getting their approval. Jack Buck Field, we are proposing to actually make major improvements to Jack Buck Field, proposing roughly 300,000, I believe, in this FY 2024. We are hopeful that we will end up getting a grant for all of the improvements that are needed at Jack Buck Field, and that then those funds can be used perhaps for a loan to the golf course fund to make some improvements that are needed on the golf course. Proposing to fund a dump truck within Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. We'll continue with the annual programs, the tree pruning, as well as the dead tree removal. We're also proposing to fund a skid steer loader replacement. Again, this is just the annual programs that we are continuing to recommend that you fund. Some of the other funds I want to briefly touch on. Public safety sales tax will end up having a fund balance there, roughly $373,000. For the capital improvement program, we will have an anticipated ending fund balance of $1.8 million. That is where I will be looking to obtain funding if you agree to move forward with the repair of the gym. It will be this fund, capital improvement fund, as well as this next fund, which is the Parks and Stormwater Fund. If it is funded from the capital improvement fund, I'll be making a recommendation that we receive those funds back from Parks and Stormwater when possible. One of the things regarding Parks and Stormwater that I would ask you to keep in mind is that you have approved the construction of a detention basin. That cost continues to increase. We believe it will range between $3 and $4 million that we will have responsibility for. So the total cost is about $14 million for the construction of that detention basin. So today, if the project were completely designed, I would be recommending that we use general funds to cover those costs and then get a repayment from Parks and Stormwater to the general fund for those costs. We're not in that situation today. The project isn't completely designed, but we will need to take the opportunity of this time lag to build up this fund balance. Certainly no one predicted that we would have had the flood, which has severely impacted this fund balance. But be that as it may, we still need to take actions to rebuild it. The EDRST fund will continue to have a healthy fund balance. One of the projects that we have not identified for this particular budget, but it is included in the work plan, is a beautification project. And we will be asking the EDRST board for a recommendation to you, as well as staff will make a recommendation to you on that program later on in fiscal year 2024. Third Ward Revitalization Fund. As you can see, it has roughly a fund balance of $3.3 million. That is still being reconciled at this point. So we anticipate that it's going to be close to that number, but it may not be exactly. Our finance director, Keith Cole, is still working with the county to reconcile the balance. I mentioned earlier that we are recommending the creation of a equipment replacement fund for fiscal year 24. The $100,000 that you see here is a transfer from the solid waste fund into the equipment replacement fund to begin to cover some of the costs for the solid waste trash trucks that we know we will need to replace. A few of the amendments that I intend to recommend to you: the addition of the citizen survey of $25,000, the increase in the transfer from general fund to the third ward revitalization fund of increased amount of $16,000. And again, this does not reflect our current fund balance for general fund, does not reflect the settlement amounts that we received because of the settling of the charter case. I believe that this is going to be closer to $950,000. A few things that are on the horizon. We will need to identify the financing mechanism for retiring the debt that will be needed for the renovation of the annex for police operations and the Trinity building. I will be recommending the approval of the solid waste rate amounts that were identified in 2019. Certainly, if not all, a significant portion of those rates. The detention basin construction project, which I just highlighted. I would also like to ask the pension board for the non-uniform for a 2% cost of living increase. I would have recommended for the uniform employees as well. But as you know, their pension fund currently is up under the 80% requirement that's needed for additional financial impacts. Right now, the non-uniform employees that are retired have not received a cost of living adjustment since 2007. And as you can appreciate, with not just the inflation that's happened recently, but prior years, how that has affected their buying power. The other item I would like to highlight is the flood recovery efforts. We will continue to need to purchase equipment. We still have non-emergency facilities that will need to be repaired. Centennial Common being the major one, but there are others with the Public Works Yard that still needs to have some improvements to it as well. We would be happy to take any questions that you have.
Are there questions from members of council? Mr. Clay, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Couple things. And unfortunately, I was trying to find the work plan and it was unable to do so on my device. Are there any projects related to IT? I know it's a relatively small part of the budget in comparison to other things. Let me ask that, are there any work plan projects associated with IT?
Mayor, Councilmember Clay, congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
And I'm just surprised you're awake.
It's a struggle.
To answer you, yes. One of the projects that we identified was the servers.
Okay.
For example, there are others that are within the work plan But yeah, there's certainly a need for the IT personnel that we have in both police as well as the one person that reports to the assistant city manager. So there will be plenty to keep them busy. And I can provide you with a list of all of those projects. Just don't have that with me today.
And wasn't necessarily expecting a list certainly, but my question derives from two places. One is cybersecurity. We know that is an increasing issue. We know municipalities, financial institutions, all manner of bodies have been under attack. So there's that, and just ensuring that there's security on that front, but also access to city services, to city accommodations. I work with very patient folks in Director Cole's office with my trash bill because all my other bills are automated, except this one because I have to provide a paper check and do something else. And I haven't had a paper check in 5 years. I mean, just there's a whole lot of things to it, but they're delightful and assist me with getting my trash bill paid. But cybersecurity and kind of citizen interface with the city as it relates using technology. Not suggesting that anything be added at this point. I know in many organizations, IT is something that for a variety of reasons just doesn't rise to the top all the time. So certainly not casting any aspersions on anyone in the city or the planning process. Happens everywhere. But I would ask that we look at cybersecurity and the resident interface with technology. Is it, can we for example, easily make tea times online at Ruth Park, those kinds of things that I think actually might have some fiscal impact if we do it right. If we make it easier for people to pay, especially, we might see some upside to it.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Clay, during your next council meeting, you will be presented with an item that asked that will be recommending a different firm for cybersecurity. We are aware that City of Dallas was recently hacked, and the millions that it cost when you get hacked, especially if it's ransom. And some of the cities that have been attacked and successfully attacked are still recovering 2 to 3 years after the fact. So I will be recommending investing more into cybersecurity efforts. The second item has to do with having more of a 24/7 city hall. That's something that IT will be heavily involved in. And I believe that project is identified within the work plan. So, cybersecurity, I believe that it's worth paying the dollars up now so that you aren't in the position of having to pay significant dollars later. And secondly, moving us more towards a 24/7 city hall where there's greater access to information, to scheduling online that reduces the need for residents and businesses to come to City Hall.
My next question was regarding the Jack Buck Field. So it is currently inoperable, correct?
That's correct.
We have dollars set aside for the restoration. When do we anticipate the field would be operable?
If we receive the grant, well, two things. One, if we receive the grant, I think that we will be able to invest a great deal of funding upfront that will make it operable within a shorter time period. I believe that I'm going to look at Darren here to say, if we can have it ready for play next summer, that's our goal. I believe that a grant probably advances that for us, as well as if you decide that it's a higher priority than some of the other improvements that could possibly change things as well. But I would ask that you keep in mind that our public works, many of those operations are operating out of the community center. So we are not back to the normal operations at this point. And where I know Jack Buck Field is hugely important to you as a council and to the community, there may be other improvements that may have a higher priority. But all goes well. The intention is to have it up and operating next summer.
Oh, he's coming up.
I'm asking Darren to come up and give his insight regarding it.
Thank you, Mr. Rose, Mayor Crowe, members of council, Mr. Clay. To answer your question, it's not a simple question, but we are looking at the restoration of Jack Buck Field. There are some issues with Jack Buck Field that pretty much the whole outfield is in a floodway. The rest of the field is in the AE flood zone. So there are some permitting, some other stuff on restoration. We are, as Mr. Rose stated, there are some funds in the budget that we're looking for that. There are some FEMA funds. We are looking into grant opportunities. At the same time, we are looking at some other areas that we could do baseball in as well and make some improvements there. So right now, we're just looking at all of our options of what we can do, but it is our goal, as Mr. Rose stated, trying to get their fields back up into play and to what everybody expects.
If I can just quickly follow up on that, though, what you said permitting, aren't we the permitters?
No, depending on the level of work, if we decide to move forward, that there might be some Corps of Engineers permitting that we maybe have to go through on that, since it is in a floodway.
And finally, thank you, Mayor Crowe. Under planning development, the highlights funds nuisance abatement lots. Forgive me, can you say a little bit more about what that is? I think I know what that is. And I have a question if it is in fact what I think it is.
As you know, we restarted the abatement basically of those dilapidated houses that over the course of the last couple of years, we go through the process that's required legally before we abate them. But that's the intention, is to continue to fund that program so that when we have dilapidated homes, we can take action to tear them down.
And how many have we been able to actually demolish thus far?
I will ask, do you have a number? I'm looking at
Okay.
John Wagner. I don't know if any have you demolished any? I don't know that we have that number, but we can certainly get it to you. That goes back to Clifford Cross when we started that program again.
I I've been here. I think the last one we did was.
Okay, that's correct. So the last one that occurred was when Mr. Cross was here, but we'll get you the exact number.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I have a few, but I'm happy to yield to anyone. Mr. Smotherson.
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. Question that I have for Mr. Rose is I'm going to start on page 35. You stated, if you could explain real quickly, because I've probably just kind of missed it. You stated out of the EDRST fund summary, you're going to ask the council for a beautification fund. And can you explain that again, please?
Sure. Mayor Pro Tem Smotherson. The beautification project will be the implementing the olive corridor plan that was established several years ago. That will be a part of it. That plan may need to be amended somewhat because it was, I believe, approved roughly in 2007, 2008. It's pretty dated, but I think it will give us an opportunity, and you as a council, to review that, what was proposed regarding sidewalks and lighting, for example, but also whether we should have a theme that traverses the olive corridor. Equally, should we have a theme that traverses Del Mar Boulevard as well? So I think those are the two areas, the two major corridors that we have, the areas that we will look to really have significant entryways when you're coming into University City. Certainly, the projects need to be better thought through, but that gives you at least what I have in mind.
Okay, thank you. The next question I have is going back to parks and recreation. So this is the plan for the next fiscal year, if I'm correct. And so I'm kind of curious because I'll even just make the statement. Heman Park is falling apart. And I'm not sure I even understand why it's in the condition that it is. And I was speaking to Councilmember McMahon about that, and he explained some things, and I do appreciate his information because I would like to get from the Parks Director the reason why we still have a gravel parking lot in Heman Park. And I'd like to understand that better because there may be some grants that prevent us from paving it. And I'd like to understand that and get that information. But the other thing that I wanted to say, and I explained in that we have the rails, those wooden rails that line the parking lot and the drive-through, the driveway that comes in, they're all rotted. I mean, they're literally all falling apart. And to the condition that some of them you can't even sit on or, or lean against because you get splintered. But my point is they're all falling apart. And I'll mention this, we have probably one of the most popular concert series in the city, and it's drawing a lot of attention. But what's interesting is that, I mean, you have this plan, but it doesn't have lighting for the area. And we've talked about that probably in the last 2 years because it's necessary to have the field lights on so people can see. And we've talked about that, but there is still no lighting in that area. There isn't, even if you made the option of having people park in the tennis court parking lot on the olive side, there is no lighting leading people through and from that parking lot to the concert area, if you understand what I'm saying. So see, again, and I'm just trying to understand why is Heman Park falling apart? Why are we there? And in this plan, there's nothing about those improvements. And again, you have a concert band playing in a shell. You have bands playing in a shell that is probably a zillion years old. I don't know. I call it the tin can. And we are still using that when you have other park facilities and municipalities that have shells or concert amphitheater. And we have neither one of those. The one thing I'll say is that we have a concert band, the University City Concert Band. The percussionists and in their case can't bring all of their instruments because they sink into the ground, and they have to bring wooden forms to sit those instruments on because they play in the grass. I'm just simply saying, we've been doing this for a while. Okay, I'll leave that alone, but that's my issue in reference to the parks, and I'm surprised there's nothing about improvements when we have a park falling apart. But go ahead.
Mayor, if I could respond to the Mayor Pro Tem, I think that with regards to improvements to the parks, it's you as a council that make those decisions. If you as a council decide we want to allocate a great portion of this budget to parks and recreation improvements, then you certainly have the ability to. What I indicate in the transmittal letter is that this budget really focuses on getting us back to normal operations. We had a historic flood and no one could have predicted that was going to occur, but that resulted in more than $14 million of impact to University City. Now we're going to get some of that back through FEMA, but a great portion of that we're going to need to incur ourselves. We began looking at what are the most important priorities. And I believe you said the emergency services were first, and then trying to move back to normal operations, moving our people out of the community center back into the Public Works yard. So some of those things will need to, we will be asking, or I certainly will be recommending that you fund. We're not certain as far as what the extent of all of the costs are going to be at this point, as well as we don't know when FEMA will give us the approval to move forward with those improvements. So I agree. I may not necessarily agree that Heman Park is falling apart. I believe that Heman Park is still a very beautiful facility and a wonderful amenity for the community. But I do agree with you that it needs some improvement. It's just a question of what's the priority. We have many, many needs. How do you want to allocate the funding, the limited funding that you have to try and meet those needs? And that's what this proposed budget does. But you're welcome to agree with all of it, none of it, make changes. I'm just simply saying, here's what I'm recommending. And I think this recommendation will keep you in a very strong financial position, because as we did not predict the flood that recently occurred, we cannot predict the next emergency as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one other thing, and this is on page 26 under Public Works. And I just, again, if you can briefly explain, you stated that you wanted to reduce the funds for street maintenance and curb and sidewalk maintenance.
Two things, yes, I want to reduce it for this year, for next fiscal year, and pick back up in the following fiscal year. But in addition to what's been highlighted up under street and curbs, is also the work that needs to occur on Canton. So those funds have not been included in the curb and sidewalk and street improvements funds. It's a separate project, but very well could have been. So I believe that that the department has a lot on its plate. Canton is a major improvement that is occurring, and so I'm suggesting that we reduce it, not significantly, but somewhat, and allow us to pick it back up the following fiscal year. Again, Canton is in addition to the $2 million that is being allocated for this fiscal year that they're managing.
All right, I'm still, okay, I'm not sure, but okay, anyway. So again, in reference to funds for the fire department and police department with drones, those funds you're allocating because of for replacement, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I'm just making sure I'm getting all of my questions answered. And I think I have one more. Sorry about that. I've got to go backwards. Making sure. Okay, one other thing, and then this is my last question. You stated that with the revitalization fund, and we're putting in $92,000 from the general fund into the Third Ward Revitalization Fund, correct?
That's incorrect.
That's incorrect. Okay, yeah.
What
that's
I'll be
I'm-
recommending is $108,000. So it's 92,000 plus the 16,000 that I'll be recommending as an amendment, and that is consistent with the redevelopment agreement. So funding will come from the sales taxes out of general fund, the pool tax, and then another funding source is from I call it the special improvement district. But two sources of funding. One is from city revenues, and the other will be from the CID. I think that's right, John. You're looking whimsical, so is it different?
The SID technically is not generating revenue for the city. That's for the redevelopment project, reimbursing the cost associated with that to the developer. The city will receive sales tax revenue from the development as well as under the redevelopment agreement, as you indicated. There are certain payments, that 92,000 is the annual amount. And then if there's a grocery operator of a
Well,
certain
that's-
size, then that increases under the agreement. And that right now is uncertain.
So then, I'm sorry, the 92,000, 108 comes from the city, but the 92,000 comes from the CID.
Well, the 92,000 comes from the TIF.
Well,
The
yeah.
TIF, and the 108 will also come from the TIF, assuming there's a grocery operator that comes in there. Of course, you have additional sources of funding for third ward revitalization, including the RPAs. Will be some in RPA 2, but also RPA 3, as you know, covers at least on the north side of Elwood, I believe, the third ward, and there will be TIF money generated from that as well, both sales tax as well as property tax that goes into the TIF fund, and then that may be used for the third ward revitalization.
Right. So as you recall, the idea was to Mayor Pro Tem provide $10 million over a 23 year period to the third ward for third ward revitalization, and the funding structure that you have approved will accommodate that.
Other questions? Mr. McMahon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be quick. So with the street maintenance, and Mr. Smotherson was mentioning the street maintenance mentioned on page 26 related to public works, but there's also street maintenance in the parks falling under parks now. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Yes, the public works street maintenance focuses on the annual programs for curb and sidewalk, as well as the engineering part of, the overlays, for example, that occur. For what I'm recommending to switch the street division to place it up under parks, so that it could get economies of scale from having a combined maintenance division. That will focus on sealing the streets. That will also focus on primarily slurry seal, but also mowing and things of that nature. So I want to make sure I'm covering everything. Sure. Because I think I'm missing one. So it's the ceiling, but it's something else.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mayor Crowe, members of council, Mr. McMahon, sorry. Basically, under the park side of it, on the street maintenance, it's the day-to-day maintenance, mainly taking care of potholes, crack sealing, a parking lot sealing, striping, street sign replacements, those sort of things. We do the leaf collection, snow removal, those things, opposed to on the public work side. Those are your capital projects. Like Mr. Rose has stated, your overlays and sidewalks. If it's not just a couple slabs, if it's a whole block type sidewalk replacement, that would fall under the capital programs under public works.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I noticed in the kind of the smaller scale projects where our residents might be calling us about, potholes and this and that, more, as Mr. Dunkel said, the day to day, it looked like there was an increase in funding for those services. Is that increase dollar wise going to be enough to account for inflation cost increase that we've also faced as a public entity? We still face that as well, so that we're at least kind of covering what we've done in the past, if not gotten a little better, because that is some of the things that our residents say, there's a pothole, there's a this, there's a that they want to reach. Is that increase sufficient to at least maintain what we've been doing?
Well, Honorable Mayor, Councilmember McMahon, yes. In fact, being able to switch the old, I will say, street division and place it up under this new division will enable us to do more pothole repairs, more street sealing than what we have done the prior 4 or 5 years. So that was one of the reasons for the switch in consolidating those divisions into one larger division.
And then switching a little bit to the slight, some rate increase with solid waste. Were we able to make headway in determining if with our increases, if we still need to have yard waste stickers? And I know there's competing arguments for having them and not having them, but I know we were kind of looking to see, can we roll that into the solid waste bill so that we aren't dealing with stickers and that for some of our residents? Did we make any headway on that?
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember McMahon, the intention is to conduct another, to have our 2019 solid waste rate study updated to current day. So I know that that's one of the items that a couple of you have talked about. And so we'll be looking to see if we can simply roll that into the solid waste bill. But included in the proposed budget is funding that would allow for that update to occur.
And then shifting again back to Centennial Commons, and you talked about getting the basketball court fixed and other renovations that still might need to be done for getting us back to normal, so to speak, after the flood. Does this budget accommodate enough staff so that we can get them in place so that when we get the infrastructure, we'll have something that people will want to go to? Because I've had folks talking to me that have said, well, in the meantime, I'm going to look over here and I'm going to look over there. And they've started to say, you know, I can get a really good deal over here. If we don't have a good product, we're going to have a basketball, probably the basketball court will get used, but we may have a Centennial Commons that isn't having folks in it. And then it becomes, what's the point? So I want to make sure that those two things work in tandem, that we get things built at the same time we have staff working on the things that will draw them back in besides equipment.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember McMahon, that's certainly the intention is to marry the improvements and making sure that we have the staff on board where it enables people to enjoy those facilities. But in addition to that, we need to be better at marketing the facilities. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I received a flyer in my home that was marketing the Clayton facilities. And so we must do a much better job of letting our residents know and others of the wonderful amenity that we have and why we think that our prices are extremely competitive with the marketplace. And so we'll look at marketing, we'll look at ensure that we have adequate staffing once those improvements have been made.
And then my last comment will just kind of go with both of my third ward councilman colleagues. I agree with Mr. Clay that our interface with our residents needs to get better. Maybe websites are old news and technology is different now, but I still hear people telling me when I go on the website, I can't find this, I can't find that, I can't find this. I went on the website the other day to find something, and the members listed on the commission had not been updated since I was liaison, and I'm no longer, and I haven't been a liaison there in years. So that just, those kind of things. So I think I do agree with Mr. Clay that our interface needs to be upgraded. And along with Councilman Smotherson, I was at Heman on Sunday, and those big wooden barricades are falling down. And I know Mr. Dunkel had mentioned they are looking into new ways to stop people from driving on the grass. define the parking area, so I know that's underway. I wouldn't go so far as that it was falling apart, but those in particular were falling apart.
Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification on the sources of revenue. The kind of like the third largest is the charges for services. Clarify that for me. I have no idea what that, it's like the seventh item down, 1, 2, 8th item down. Just what are charges for services?
Charges of services can range from your solid waste bill. Could also, I believe, include payments that we receive from developers for permitting. I believe they are all combined. Looking at our finance director, I want to make sure we give you good information on that.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Fuller, the service for charges from the general fund includes the ambulance services, weeds and debris, and the police services contributions that we assign with the resource officer with the school district.
Okay.
And then for the solid waste fund, then it's all the refuse fees that makes up that.
Mr. Hales.
Thank you. Actually, I have a question to preface my question that the finance director might help with. Getting back to trash, our trash is billed twice a year. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Perfect. So getting back to trash and a rate increase, I've kind of followed. We're not the only city that has had a solid waste budget challenge. Very close to us, our neighbors in Clayton have never actually billed separately for trash. That's beginning this year. I did the math on what they're proposing to charge per 6 months, and it's about $100 more than we currently charge. However, they're approaching the billing from a quarterly basis. And I was just kind of wondering, given some of the challenges with collections, which I'm sure we're also not alone with, if billing quarterly might be a better strategy. I know there's more cost in mailings and that kind of thing, but it would be a smaller bill. And if that's something we've looked at, I'm kind of curious what other communities do that bill separately, if they bill quarterly, if that's more successful with collections and billing twice a year. And I was also kind of curious, I don't recall offhand right here what that's 2019 solid waste study suggested, what the total was. I seem to think it's probably in line with the $100 more, ideally.
I can, Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Hales, a couple of things. One is, if you approve the budget, it does not automatically go into effect. Solid waste increases. My intention is to bring that back to you so that you clearly understand what the impact will be to residents and businesses that are within the community. Just off the cuff, I think it was a 3% increase for residents, but the major increase was for multifamily housing and for commercial.
Okay, thank you. One other thing that's not necessarily related specifically to our budget, if I can find where I wrote it down. It related to our property tax rates. And, there's been some discussion, as there always is, about our property taxes on reassessment years. And I know that I don't think our municipal property tax rate of 0.581 per $100 of assessed value has changed, or certainly has not gone up in, I think, 5, 6, 7 years, perhaps. I have heard from residents and seen at least some social media comments. I thought the county had some effort with this reassessment to identify those properties that were flooded as part of the reassessment. And I've heard that that might not have been so successful. Do you know, has the county been in touch with the city about which properties we had, or this is not necessarily a city issue.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember House, John Wagner has been working with the county, and so I would ask him to come up and he can probably give you a better response to that question. Have they been working with us to identify the properties that have been flooded? Yes. I simply don't recall what they are doing with that information, and John might. Mr. Wagner?
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Would this be, good evening, everybody. Would this be the information that we sent to the county assessor sometime back? I haven't heard anything back. I wondered about that this morning. I haven't heard anything back from them about what they were doing with it. We sent them a variety of spreadsheets a few months ago. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Thank you. It does. And again, this is not really a budget related issue, but when we look at the people in our community who suffered tremendously from the flood, if we sent that information, I think it would be wonderful if they would send back kind of the correlating reassessments for the properties that we provided in case they might have been missed, because I think the folks who were flooded certainly went through enough already.
I have talked to a few of the folks that were affected, and they were getting those breaks on the property taxes, so they were doing something with them. I just haven't heard back a comprehensive.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were mostly covered, but it does seem like some folks who were directly affected by the floods did not saw significant increases where I think most people would say that's maybe not warranted. So, yeah, I would love it if there's
Mr. Rose doesn't mind, I'll send a message off and see if I can get an update with what they're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry. Mr. Rhodes, if I may take my few questions here. In our last audit and the one before, they had requested that we continue to look for ways to separate functions in the finance area. And I'm seeing there's no change in personnel in the finance area other than the creation of a new position. Is there any other plan to address that audit concern that has been mentioned a couple of times?
Yeah, the primary audit, it's like criticism, constructive criticism, was two things. One is reconciling, making sure that we reconciled our bank accounts, as well as that we reduced the number of journal entries that needed to occur at the end of the fiscal year. And I know that our finance director is working, has taken action to address the reconciling of our bank accounts, and is taking action to ensure that we don't have all of the journal entries that we have had in the past. So, Mr. Cole, I'll have him come up and perhaps better address that issue.
Mr. Rose, I'm a mayor, members of council. I'm a mayor. We're working, one of the main things is reconciling our grants and the amount of journal entries that were needed to reconcile our grants. And it's difficult. We're working with the Public Works Department they compile a lot of the grants. So it's kind of tedious on trying to reconcile the grants between the funds that we've received and then what we anticipate the funds in receiving. So I feel pretty good this fiscal year because we got new staff in the public works and they got pretty good grasp on the grants. So I think I'm hoping, being optimistic that we'll get that hammered out before the audit starts.
There's a couple more that you may want, just based on how this has been going tonight, you may be nearby on this one. On page 8, and I think I've mentioned this before, we have 13% of our revenue coming from other financing sources. And I still believe that anything over 10% shouldn't be in other or miscellaneous. So is there some way that you can explain what it is? And then can we change this so that I think to our citizens, having something that large, just say other, doesn't quite give much of a description.
The other financing sources are the transfers in. That is considered, so the transfers in on the financial statements, it's considered other financing sources. So that 4 million is.
This is 6.5, this is 6,503,000.
Yeah, so that's all considered transfers in except 40,000 of it. 40,000 of it is insurance recoveries for budgeted. And then the rest is all transfers.
So is that, okay, so I'll just follow up. So is there some way that when we do this next year, that instead of just having other financing sources, that we can have a description that we all know what it is other than other financing sources? Yeah, transfers or something in something or a footnote or something. Okay, so that's that one. And then the next one was the same one on the 4.4 million that you just mentioned. And then the last ones were on page 17. We talk about police and fire. And I'm just asking, and this may be more for Gregory than for Keith, I'm not certain. But where are we as a percentage of the budget for police and fire in 2023 versus 2022, 2021? Is this number, which is 32.8 and 21.8, is this a relatively constant percentage of the budget, or are we going up or are we going down?
No, it's relatively constant. Police, public safety, it isn't unusual for that to be a very large percentage of general fund and the overall budget that any municipality has. So yeah, I would say that it's pretty constant, that amount. Now that may change as we continue to grow our commercial businesses within University City, because we have not identified all of the staffing that will be needed to provide adequate public safety services, policing services for even the markets at Olive. But certainly once that's is nearing build out, we will need to have greater presence in that area. Right now, we have this lag while it's still underway, and we will balance the presence that the city has with encouraging those businesses to have their own private security as well.
And then on the police and fires, are we, I think you and I have talked before about headcount and how hard it is to, in my business, particularly to find staffing. Are we in police and fire 80% staff, 85? How many open positions in police and fire, give or take?
I'll ask our police chief, Chief Hampton, to come and respond to that. I don't know what it is today.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. I would say we're a confident over 80%. And the reason being, the problem we're having, besides the attrition of retirement and early retirement and resignations, is the institutional knowledge that we're transferring them out with new personnel. Specifically, we have two graduates that come out on Thursday. We plan to have them sworn in on Friday. They hit the street on Saturday. So that time frame of, okay, I have one retiring on Friday. That's a 26-year veteran. A couple weeks ago, maybe less than a month ago, I had a 25-year veteran. So specifically, what we're seeing is the transferring or the trading of personnel and institutional knowledge, but getting a different crop of people coming in. I'm working with Mr. Rose on some innovative techniques on sponsoring at other police academies other than St. Louis County as well. And that's something that we believe will be a boost to our efforts of putting us ahead of the curve and confidently staying above that 80 percentile. But yes, I would say 80 percentile. We have a CBA that we try to meet with our union, and they understand the minimum requirements of providing the public safety for the community.
Thank you, Chief. And for fire, same ballpark?
While he's coming, I would like to also ask that you keep in mind for both police and fire, but police specifically, very difficult time trying to recruit personnel for that. So we can't only focus on the staffing, we also must focus on technology. And that's where you saw the drones come in so that we can reduce at some point the so that we can make sure that we have a good balance between the number of people that we have on staff and the ability to maximize the use of new technologies to assist us in our policing efforts.
Mr. Mayor, Council, we only have one opening right now, and we're hoping to have it filled by next week.
Thank you. My last comments are probably more along with Mr. McMahon and Mr. Smotherson in that I think we all recognize that probably the jewel of our park system, by far the largest and probably most used, is Heman. I'll also say, though, that having sat up here for 15 years, I don't think we've ever had a conversation about or a question about paving the parking lot or about the shell. And so I also would say that I think that the Park Commission and the Parks Department tends to send out surveys so that we can rank what our citizens look for. And I'm not sure I've seen any of these things come up. So I'm hoping that I appreciate the conversation, but I also recognize that a large part of what we do in our Parks Department is derived from what our citizens tell us and what they tell the Park Commission. And I'm kind of trying to find the disconnect here between, I have no idea why Heman Park hasn't had paved parking lots. It could be because they're big, but I mean, I have no idea, or the shell, but I also don't think it's ever come up before. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be discussed. I don't think it's necessarily bubbled up too often. And with all of the amenities that are in Heman, from the tennis courts to Centennial Commons to the pool to the fields, that is an awful lot of terrain and probably does warrant further consideration. But I really am trying to wrap my my arms around the idea of where's the disconnect with the Heman Park usage and us wanting to do things there versus when we've seen the priorities come out from citizens to the Park Commission and then from the Park Commission to us. I honestly just don't remember. Maybe I'm failing in my memory, but I don't remember them rising to the top. But I see a green light, so I want to make sure I give you a chance to enlighten me.
Well, thank you, Mayor Crow, and thank you for that point. I think that the disconnect is that the people that are attending these concerts and these events don't know the process, and that's something that needs to be done in educating them. But I also say this, that one of the things that I'm trying to emphasize in putting people on these commissions is to put people on commissions that actually attend these events. And I could almost guarantee you that probably none of the people on Parks Commission attend these concerts.
Any other questions of Mr. Rose for the study session on the budget? Hearing none, what I would actually say is follow what Mr. Smotherson just said is, to all of my colleagues, would you please take a look at the vacancies on our commissions? And if we can recruit some folks, it would be great. I know that Ms. Reese has some concerns about vacancies in particular, and some of the commissions need special backgrounds or educational or work. But to all of you, if we can fill some of these slots with folks who would like to do the lifting, that would be great. If there's nothing else, this study session is adjourned. Have a nice evening. Thank you for joining us.